Good morning. This is Father Stephen Kelly from St. John's Church in Detroit. We're continuing our series of daily morning meditations, where we generally look at one or another of the lessons that are assigned for morning or evening prayer, what is known as the Daily Office Lectionary. I thought today for Wednesday, let's take a look at the lesson that's assigned for evening prayer, the first lesson. Now, we're going through the book of Job. We're not going to cover all of the book of Job in the lectionary because it's not kind of how the lectionary does it, but we're kind of hitting highlights of the story of Job, his lament towards God, and then ultimately, and also what his friends will have to say about his situation, and then ultimately what God has to say about his situation. And as Dr. Peter Kraft writes in his book called The Three Philosophies of Life, this is one of the three philosophies that we find in the Old Testament. One is that life is suffering, the book of Job, Ecclesiastes, that life is vanity, and the Song of Songs, life is love. But all three of them, of course, are a part of the scriptures and therefore important for us to know. So we're on Wednesday, Job chapter 5, beginning at verse 8. I would seek unto God, and unto God would I commit my cause, which doeth great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number, who giveth rain upon the earth, and sendeth waters upon the fields, to set up on high those that be low, that those which mourn may be exalted to safety. He disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. He taketh the wise in their own craftiness, and the counsel of the froward is carried headlong. They meet with darkness in the daytime, and grope in the noonday as in the night. But he saveth the poor from the sword, and from their mouth, and from the hand of the mighty. So the poor hath hope, and iniquity stoppeth her mouth. Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty, for he maketh sore and bindeth up. He woundeth, and his hands make whole. All right, so this idea of blessed is the man whom the Lord chasteneth. I remember having a conversation with another priest where I said, sometimes God says no to things. And he was just horrified that somehow we would think that God would have the image of tough love. Well, guess where that image comes from, folks? It's the image from Scripture. Sometimes God does say no to things that we want and that we think would be good. And sometimes, even if we are doing good, sometimes God has to remove that from us because he has better in store for us. So here's Job, and this is at the beginning of the story. We're only in chapter 5. He's already lost his family. He's already begun to suffer physically. And we know in this wager that's happening that these things are happening to Job. It's not his fault. In fact, God is proving this. And yet, Job is still at this point praising God. Now it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And his friends are going to heap it on and they're going to pile it on. Eventually, Job is going to turn to God and say, look, it's just not fair. But we haven't gotten to that yet. Even in the beginning of Job's pain and Job's suffering, we hear that, in fact, he acknowledges that God is the one who's still ultimately in charge. God is the one who can give and take away. And so happy is the man whom the Lord correcteth, right? Because if we're doing wrong, if we're on the wrong path, we want to be able to do what is right and good and pleasing in God's eyes. And so being corrected, sometimes that's painful, but being corrected is, in fact, a blessing, and we should be happy for that. So we should despise not the chastening of the Almighty. So today is Wednesday. We do have a 12:15 Holy Communion and 4 o'clock evening prayer. I hope that you can join us at one or both of those services, live and in person, or where you're watching this live stream. And may God grant you a Wednesday, a wonderful Wednesday that is full of blessings.